Good evening all and welcome. Tonight we're going to be heading into the deep woods for a collection of scary stories. Before we begin, don't forget to download our app with over 2,500 extra stories. Follow us on social media at Mortis Media and subscribe and press the bell icon for more content 3 times a week. But for now, it's time to get comfortable. Grab your flashlights and let the darkness take control. My father and I were taking a quick hike just a few miles north of Butte, Montana. It was a very warm June afternoon, perfect for a little hike. We were only a mile or so away from where we had parked when we saw a large trash bag alone in the trail. I hate litter bugs, especially out in the woods. I intended to haul it back with us and dispose of it properly. But when I attempted to lift the bag, it was heavy, much heavier than I had anticipated. Curiosity got the better of me, and my father and I split the bag open to see what was inside. I was expecting to see a dead animal of some sort. It's not totally unusual for someone to dispose of a dead dog or cat in this fashion in this part of the world. Some people out here will poach deer and leave the trimmings like this too. Upon opening the bag, we saw a boot. Then socks, then pants. We then realized they were all attached to human legs. It looked so unreal, like a movie prop, like someone took a saw and cut off a store dummy's legs and groin. They had to be some sort of prank, right? It wasn't. I fell backward and started having a panic attack. Nothing prepares you for something like that. My dad, on the other hand, sprung into action. He immediately closed the bag up as best he could and then started to slowly survey our surrounding area. That freaked me out even more. Through my gasps, I asked him what he was looking for. All he said was that someone may be watching us. Can you imagine stumbling upon a serial killer dump site and they're at a distance watching you? This really didn't help my panic. As I tried to calm down, my dad called the Silverbow County Sheriff and reported what we had found. Limp-legged, we hiked the mile or so back to the road and waited for the cops to show. The authorities searched the area with cadaver dogs for a week and never found any other pieces of the body or even a scent trail to follow. The sheriff's people even searched our truck and interviewed us to see if we might be responsible. Nothing ever came of the incident, not a single thing. It's been just over 10 years and no one has any idea who the legs belong to or how they got there. No missing persons reports match the DNA, and the legs never showed up on any databases. Butte, Montana has a reputation for being a bit on the rough side, so it's not impossible a guy who was local ran into trouble. But why would his family or friends not report him missing? Surely someone would notice that he was gone or at least legless. I don't think we'll ever know the truth, but someone out there knows what happened and aren't eager to give us the whole story. Me and a friend were out late one night around 10 p.m, chasing the sound of coyotes on the back end of my property. We had a suppressed .22 and were going to see if we could catch one and hopefully drive the pack away from my chickens. Well, we found a nesting spot for a group of deer when we were making our way to the back of the property. If you've never seen one, it's basically just a flat spot and a patch of grass, or sometimes in the woods, and in this case a tall patch of grass. Anyway, we're coming up past this spot that we saw a nesting area at, and we see this beautiful buck. It isn't hunting season and we're not equipped to deal with it, even if it was in addition to the fact that it's nighttime. So we take the opportunity to enjoy looking at this beautiful 6 to 8 point buck when he turns and stares at us. Now we're probably 75 yards away from looking at him, over tall grass coming through what was probably his nesting spot, or the nesting spot for some of his doe. Now it's not like he's going to be protective over the spot or anything. We actually expected him to take off and run as soon as he noticed us, but he didn't. Instead, this 5.5 foot tall, probably 200-pound specimen of buck starts stomping his front and back feet alternatingly. He's making this crazy wheezing noise like a person breathing through a plastic tube. It's pretty unsettling. I've never even seen an animal act in this way, let alone a deer. Compound by the fact that me and my friend are out there in the dark. so we just sit there and watch. I've got the gun ready but have no expectation of needing it. I figure this buck is just acting funky. It's really early in the rut, he's probably just got his Jones going a little bit too hard, too soon, not a big deal. Until the damn thing starts spinning, just hold on full speed spinning in a circle, and I swear to God, there's no making this up. The damn thing starts to laugh, not wheezing, not coughing, laughing like a man laugh, like a full-on laughter. A clear, chuckling laugh, like a person standing behind the deer and laughing, but it's coming from the deer's mouth. Then the thing stands up on 2 feet and bounces through the grass towards the woodline, and we never see it again, clearing a 4-foot fence in the process. Yeah, we gave up on the coyotes. Went back, killed the 24 case, and went to sleep. I was in the Rockies with my dad one summer vacation when I was 14, and my family of 4 were hiking ahead of us on the trail. They had a good head start. Kids petted our horses before they left the trailhead as we were saddling up. We came upon 3 of them just before a bend, stopped and chatted and asked where the 10-year-old boy was. They said he was around the bend checking for something. We rode ahead a bit around the bend and found a mountain lion in the trail. It was standing above the boy. Blood was everywhere. My dad charged his horse at the mountain lion, pulled the revolver he always carried while we were on the trail, and shot in the air. The lion ran pretty fast into the woods. My dad fired 2 after it after he passed the boy, then turned and jumped off to see the kid. I came up since my saddlebags had the first aid kit that we carried. The kid was alive, but my dad had his hand over the kid's throat, and blood was everywhere. The father of the family came around the corner to see what the gunshots were and saw the boy. There was a lot of yelling, but I don't really remember what was said. I was locked on my horse. I was a Boy Scout and had first aid training, but I was just frozen there. I was just in shock. I don't really want to go into any details, but the younger boy didn't make it. The mountain lion was hunted down by park rangers the next day, found out that it was pregnant and starving, which is why it was inclined to target a human. I'm sharing this story here to whoever goes out into the woods, especially in places with a high population of predatory animals, like the Rockies. Stay together, stay armed, stay informed of the danger. Listen to the rangers and their warnings, prepare, take precautions, and for goddamn sake, don't go by yourself. My ex and I were waiting for a party in college and decided to meander around dirt roads no one really touched. We found a flipped car in the ditch. The driver's arm was sticking out of the window. We approached it slowly and tried to talk to the person to see if they were still alive. We touched their hand that was sticking out, hoping for a response. We called 911 as soon as we saw it, but it took time for them to arrive. When they did, whoever was in the car had passed away. We were passing the time to have a good, fun party college night, but stumbled across this body. I felt so heartbroken even thinking about it, thinking about how we grabbed his hand and tried to help, but he was already gone. They assumed he was speeding on a dirt road and flipped, because that's how dirt roads are if you don't know how to drive on them. And he had what looked like a sports car, which definitely should not be speeding on dirt roads. I always wonder who it was and what happened. Was he just being goofy and speeding about, or was it intentional? How long did he suffer before he passed? No matter what the cause, at least he isn't suffering anymore. Just tragic. If you ever see a random dead body, I assure you it never leaves your head. I've been hiking a number of times and see things that you never forget. I saw 2 dead bodies in 2 different places. The first one was a woman that had drowned. My God. I really hope others never have to see what I witnessed. The second was far worse. A guy who decided to end his own life by shooting himself in the face with a shotgun. Both were 3 years from each other, and I was in my teens. Kind of a boy becomes man type of moment. Nowadays, bodies don't affect me as much, but there are some things that you take with you to the grave. This happened around 20 years ago while hunting with my dad in northern British Columbia. It was a cold October morning, and it was still dark when we parked the truck and started our hike into a clear cut. I was familiar with the area, as we had moose hunted there before. My dad went left and I went right, and I made my way to the top of a slope to get a better view of the clear cut. I found a stump to sit on and took out my binoculars and quickly found my dad in the clear cut across the mountain. As soon as I spotted him, I heard something heavy move behind me in the forest, roughly 40 yards away. I was thinking, yes, a moose. I then head towards the forest edge, when I hear a scream, or screech, the likes of which I'd never heard. It didn't sound human. It wasn't like an animal I'd ever heard before. It was so loud I swear my soul left my body for a few moments. I turned around and ran down that clear-cut hill as fast as my teenage legs would take me. When I reached my dad, he said he heard it too, and found me in his binoculars running down the clear-cut. Then looked up at the forest edge and saw a big, hairy, human-like creature standing 8 feet tall between the 2 birch trees. It stayed for a few seconds, then turned around. We got into the truck and went home for the day. We asked elders and relatives about it when we got back, and they called them the Forest Guardians. Still scares the hell out of me. I stumbled on a poaching dump when I was 14. I used to hike trails near our home, way out in the woods. I'd explore and then have to find my way back without a compass. One day I went really far, perhaps 2 to 3 miles through these old logging trails, when I began to smell something terrible. There was a rocky outcrop right before a steep cliff. At the bottom of the cliff, there was a massive pile of dead deer. Most were decapitated, some were fawns. There had to be at least 20 to 30 of them at varying states of decay. In the area where I lived, there was a very common practice to dig up graves and steal bodies. I know, disgusting, right? Well, because of this, many people buried others in a forest. We were surrounded by them, as it was a small town, and they never gave them tombstones, on the assumption that no one would find them. From what I heard, the bodies had multiple purposes. They would use the intestines and skin tissue for farming/animal hunting, dog feed and sell the rest of the body over the market, or like they used to do in the 1800s, where people would snatch a fresh body for anatomical studies. There were probably other reasons they did it. Anyway, I'd like to add that the control of the area became stricter after the law realized what was going on. People still do this to this day, but it's not super clear as to why. Well, I was walking my dogs through a forest when I happened to see something in the distance. I approach cautiously when I catch them in action. I'm going to tell you now, seeing a decomposing body with its limbs falling off was truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And the same thing happened 1 week after too. It's not something you easily forget. The stench was mind-alteringly bad. When I thought I had seen enough, I heard 4-wheelers and decided to hide. 2 poachers in camo rolled up and tossed 2 more deer carcasses on the pile. They smoked, talked, and left after 10 minutes. I was probably 15 feet from them the entire time, hiding under a hemlock tree. I didn't recognize either of them, and I knew absolutely everyone on that side of town. It was only 15 to 20 houses in a 5-mile stretch. I ran home and told my parents, who didn't believe me, and they didn't know I was running off into those trails at the time, so I got into huge trouble because of it. I should probably mention that poaching dump is when poachers and scumbag sports hunters who want trophies and nothing else kill out of season with no respect for the hunt itself and dump the meat somewhere remote so they don't get caught. I mentioned it to our neighbor who was big into hunting, and he seemed very concerned and brought it up with the game warden. They investigated and found the dump site, but they never caught anyone, and I'm 100% certain it wasn't my neighbor. Back in 2015, I was on a hiking trail in Arizona. I've hiked a lot in worse terrains in Europe, so I wasn't too worried about doing it alone. It was almost getting dark, and I was at an eerily deserted stretch for what felt like hours now, when I suddenly heard a kind of music. As I kept going, I realized it was someone whistling. It gave me the creeps, but the idea of company relieved me a bit as well. Soon enough, I saw a man in front of me walking in the same direction. He was wearing a t-shirt and pants, which was surprisingly inadequate, especially for the impending night. I passed him by. He was the one whistling indeed, and I turned to say the customary greeting. He looked up, deadpan, and without a word turned back towards the ground and kept whistling. He was walking slowly on an almost trance-like manner. I quickly averted my gaze forward and almost abruptly, the whistling stopped. I turned back to see what had happened, and there was no one on the trail. It almost felt like no one had ever been there at all. Needless to say, I freaked the hell out, made it back without any further issue, but I still wonder about what I saw and heard that night. On a backpacking trip in the Sierra Mountains in California, my buddy forgot to put his toothpaste in the bear bag, which is a bag where you need to put all food and aromatic items and hang them from a tree branch at night so that the bears won't come and eat it, find your camp, and do who knows what to you, which is obviously not a good idea. So, at around 2 a.m., we hear him yelling and get up to find a huge black bear on top of him in his tent, trying to get at the toothpaste. The rest of us had to bang pans and throw rocks in order to get the bear to leave. It was chaos. I don't think he was in any real danger at the time. The bear just really wanted that toothpaste. But after years of backpacking, I've never experienced another thing like it. Be careful out there, guys. I am a big hiker and camper and general lover of the wilderness, and I've seen mountain lions and bears, but all of that pales in comparison to what I saw that one time when I was hiking. Let me elaborate. I was on a very nice long hike in Northern California when I crested a hill and walked about 20 yards into this valley when I realized there were irrigated pot plants for as far as the eye could see, reservoirs, hoses, camouflage netting. When I saw that, I noped the hell out of there as fast as I could. I was expecting to be shot on our way back to our car. As you can imagine, trigger-happy people who live there would probably be ready to shoot you in the back to make sure no one knew where exactly this was, and I'm glad I made it out of there with this story. I was hiking alone with my dog, It was at the beginning of the hike, so I was still very close to a town. I met a family walking together, a man, woman, and a kid. The man greets me, and obviously he wants to talk, so I stop, assuming he wants to ask about my dog's breed. My dog smells him, and he says to my dog, "Ah, you know who the master is here." He then asks me, "Are you not afraid to walk alone?" And I tell him I'm not. He then asks me if I'm sure, because I'm a woman walking alone, and asks if I'm afraid of being attacked. Well, now I am, thank you. I tell him that I'm close to town now. He then told me I shouldn't be without a man, and keeps asking why I'm not scared of being assaulted or killed by someone. At this point, I want to ask him if by someone he means him. I pointed out that I had a big dog with me, and told him how my dog was protective, and wouldn't hesitate to defend me if anything goes wrong, which is true, but I mostly said it to scare him in case he had any bad intentions. I made eye contact with the woman and kid at some point, and it was obvious they were embarrassed. Eventually I left and I never saw them again. All of this took place in a rural area in France, not a place that's especially dangerous for women, aside from human trafficking and kidnapping and stuff like that. But another scary thing I saw was a massive boar. It took me a minute to understand what the creature was. Well, you know, it's actually quite dangerous. I've been hiking and backpacking for 25 years, and I've seen my fair share of stuff, whether it be bears, mountain lion prints, etc. But honestly, the scariest thing has always been other people. Not people I think are going to attack me. People I think are going to die. The number of people I see miles from the trailhead with just a t-shirt and shorts and nothing else. Nothing in their hands, no bag, no water, no food, no hat, no extra layers, compass, rain gear, etc. Well, the worst was when I was 6 miles into a backpacking trip. It was nearly dark. I'd be hiking a few hours in the darkness before I made camp, and this guy with nothing but shorts and a t-shirt passed me heading in the other direction. It was going to be pitch black soon. He had no headlamp, no jacket, no food, and he looked really stressed out. I was hiking in Cerro Chirripó in Costa Rica last May. It was a 42-kilometer trail that I started at midnight and finished at 5:30 p.m. There is a lodge at the base of the trail. Once I finished and got back, there were cops with a family there. I ate dinner and went to bed, not knowing what was going on. The next day I found out that a woman who was hiking with 2 family members had disappeared on the hike. She had apparently been hiking ahead of the other 2 for a short period when they heard her scream. When they caught up to where she'd been, she wasn't there or anywhere to be found. They searched and called out for as long as possible until they had to head down the trail to seek help. They found her body 4 days later. She had fallen off a large cliff. Turns out I passed her dead or dying body unknowingly at some point during the hike. I was a park ranger at the time in a city with some decently large parks when I got a call from a guy talking about these dolls. He insisted I meet him at his house and walk there. Red flag number 1. Nope, I'll find it on my own. It's a mountain bike park, so there are lots of trails and tight spaces. I just started walking random offshoots and found it within a few hours. Lots of dolls and stuffed animals hanging from trees around what appeared to be a small grave. A lot of them were burnt or taken apart with the eyes removed. BDSM rope style stuff wrapped in plastic bags as if suffocated. Really creepy. The grave got me the worst, as it looked like the grave for a baby. So obviously I started digging around there. I didn't find anything lucky. I still have no idea what it was. Perhaps it was someone's performance art. Who knows? As an urban ranger, you find some very strange stuff. I used to be a mountain bike photographer. I'd hike, sometimes drive, miles up a mountainside and take pictures of things. Apparently some deadbeat dad, despite the mum's complaints, encouraged his kids to do the ride alone. The dad didn't even do the event. He was just there drunk in his RV. The mum was there and didn't know. The kid, I found, had broken his arm 15 miles into the woods on a mountain bike. He was just laying in the bushes quietly. I asked if he had cell service and he said no. I asked for his mum's number and I ran to the next rest stop a mile ahead. It was awful having to leave them alone. I stopped doing events shortly after that, mostly because it was too risky. I'd be alone with no cell service, no gun to protect me from bears, and often riders would go missing. I couldn't do it mentally anymore. And I did this with no pay. But that was certainly the most terrifying thing of all that I'd seen. This story takes place in the early 2000s, before weed was legal. I was hiking deep in the redwood forest of Humboldt with my dog when 4 pit bulls popped out of the forest and jumped us. My dog slipped his collar and took off in the opposite direction. Luckily, I have a lot of dog experience because I worked at a dog daycare and grabbed the biggest one by the scruff of the neck and Caesar Millaned him onto the ground until he stopped squirming, and fortunately the others didn't bite, just barked. I let him go and they ran back into the forest, and I whistled for my dog and he came running, and got the hell out of there, before the likely illegal pot farmer owner found me and did who knows what. I was on a hike once, when I saw a man. He drove up to us on the trail, stripped down and started chasing my friend and I with his car. We climbed a large dirt mound he couldn't drive up, and ran across the empty highway and hid in the tall grass for hours, until we saw another hiker. Once we got to our hostel, we told the owner, and she said it's a local guy that does it from time to time and that he's harmless. For future hikers, it's right before you get to the halfway point on the Camino de Santiago. This is my brother's story, while he was solo hiking a small mountain near our home for field recording, when he found the remains of a sacrificial goat for black magic. It was burned with its fur still intact and placed in trees, about 10 meters from each tree. Near the sites, he heard a growl. He said it was a black panther/pantera, since he saw the footprints on the previous hike and started to run. We think that the panther eats the goat carcass and was probably upset because he came into his territory. Definitely not a situation you want to be in if you want to still be alive later. I was hiking through my regular trail. The trail is part of a park and closes at dark. I liked to go in for at least a little run every day. Well, I was late getting there this day. The path is about a 20-minute run if you take the short route. I get there around 8:30 p.m. About halfway through there's a large opening so people can sit or picnic. So I come upon the area and see on a tree a Raggedy Ann doll nailed there. It has a pentagram drawn on the forehead and a note attached saying "Touch me," written in very small writing under the note. Says "Don't touch me," and another pentagram. I ran at least 10 minutes in about 5. I went back the next day and it was gone. Unsure if Annabelle had made a run for it, or if perhaps it was a prank. People trying to scare you. I was out walking around in the forest surrounding my town at night in the middle of winter alone. I was just listening to music and dancing around, but I felt a little uneasy suddenly, so I decided to stop for a bit and take out my earbuds and right as I did, the weirdest noise came from some trees nearby. Something or someone was hitting them repeatedly with a stick. It became more and more aggressive, and it sounded like it came closer. I bolted, and luckily the hitting stopped. I heard some footsteps but saw no one. I would have probably avoided that part of the forest for the rest of my life if I believed in ghosts, because it's right by a Viking graveyard. Hopefully it was just some weird animal or human, but I don't know what the hell it was. It never happened again, and I still do my walks there in the same area at night. 13-year-old me was walking through woods with a friend. My friend tries to spook me with some dumb made-up story about a white wolf in the area that kills kids. Yeah, whatever. Not 5 minutes later, we come to the crest of a hill, and looking down into the dell, I kid you not, there's a goddamn huge white canine sitting on its haunches looking right at us, not moving a muscle. Just to the left of it, a large cardboard box filled with parts of a very reluctant butchered carcass of indeterminable origin. We stand there gobsmacked for what felt like an eternity and bolted the hell out of there and ran the 5 kilometers non-stop back to the camper. In college, my buddy and I were camping at the Mount Washington Lean to have 3 days of spring skiing at Tuckerman's Ravine. If you don't know the area, there are no lifts. You hike up a very steep and relatively short run. The camping is 2 to 3 hours from the parking lot. We wake up to a beautiful morning with not a cloud in the sky. Unfortunately, the Forest Service reports say 50-mile-an-hour winds in the ski area. The mountains have the highest wind speed record on Earth. We decided to take a short hike and then hopefully ski in the afternoon. After an hour, we can still see the lean-to and the clouds rolling in, and it's a complete whiteout blizzard. We're above the tree line with no markers, and end up coming down the wrong side hiking for hours in sometimes chest-deep snow. We finally hit a road, and a few hours later find a motel. We beg for a room, and after some cajoling get one. The next morning we hike 20 miles back to the base parking lot, climb for hours to get our skis and camping gear, and there's a raging windstorm at the lean, and we have to ski/slide down this icy trail to the parking lot. A few years later, my girlfriend, now wife, are cross-country skiing in Vermont in the spring. It's a one-way trip from the car we left. We have a map and compass and are following the long trail markers on the tree. It had recently snowed, so it's only our tracks. The prior summer the trail had been moved, but they leave some of the old tree markers, and we become lost and decide to settle in for the night. I dug a deep pit to build my fire. At about 10 the pit collapses and we put the fire out. It's pitch black, and we dug out some snow caves, but my inner brain was rebelling. Just then the moon rose and I could strap the skis and collect more firewood. We were rescued by volunteer snowmobilers, as my brother had called the police, at about 3 a.m, and it took us 3 hours to get back to our car. There was another time, when we were hiking in the Angeles National Forest, and I had a baby in a backpack. We saw a mountain lion. My wife yelled, but I calmed her and slowly backed away. When we were at a safe distance, she took the baby like a football and sprinted down the trail. I saw her meet a small group coming up. When I got to her, I asked her if she had warned them, and she said no. She just wanted to have someone between us and the lion. Her maternal instincts seemed to have overrode common courtesy. Thankfully, there was no news on that event. When we were about 11, 10, and 9, my brothers and friends and I in Arkansas would spend a lot of time in the woods, about an hour from any road. We had this cool tree house and a swing, that was a set of handlebars tied to a rope. This swing was 30 feet in the air, very dangerous. Anyway, one day hiking to the treehouse, we stumbled across this guy. He did not look homeless but scruffy. He tried to convince us to hang out with him, saying he had porn and booze. We noped out of there. To absolutely no one's surprise, the guy was later arrested for molesting at least one kid. Be careful who you speak to while out in the woods. One time I was walking through the woods at about 6 p.m. It was after dinner, and we had a family gathering outside, so no one really cared that I went exploring. It started to get dark, so I thought it would be best to walk back. But I would stop and see my friend since she lived on the same road as us. As I was walking, I heard something running around ahead of me. Since I couldn't see it, I thought it was a rabbit. I turned around to see how far I had walked since my legs were getting tired, but then I saw a tall figure peeking around a tree at me. I about crapped myself and booked it. Once I got to my friend's house, I told her and she just laughed at me, saying that I just saw things. Whenever I got home, I told my family about it and they mocked me as well, saying, "He's coming for you, or you better watch your back." It really bothered me, but I know what I saw. This happened at my parents' place when I was shooting on the old range. After we were done, my friends went to take a leak behind some bushes. After he was done, he called out, "Hey, come here, you got to see this." I walked in and saw what he was looking at. It looked like a canvas butcher's apron hung from a tree branch to form some kind of pouch, about 4 feet off the ground. There were bloodstains on it. When we inspected nearer, we noticed it had 4 or 5 deer legs in it. They'd been cut off right around the knee. This was on private land, pretty far from any neighbors, and in a place where none of them would have had a line of sight to it. In order for them to be hung there, someone would have had to hike from the nearest road 400 to 500 yards of open field without being observed by any neighbor on the way. We called the police and deputy sheriff, stopped out to look at the pictures and took statements. Then said it was probably a coyote hunter. He didn't seem too interested in the fact that none of them would have permission to hunt there. It's been 20 years and we never found out who did it, as this was a couple of years before trail cameras became popular and affordable. When I was 11, I went camping with my mum, her boyfriend and my little brother outside of Las Vegas. The middle of the desert. We went arrowhead hunting one morning and during our hike stumbled upon a full human skeleton laying on a blanket, kind of tucked under a bush, laying on their back like they fell asleep and never woke up. The boyfriend knelt down and prayed over the remains, and then we all walked back to the campsite in silence. Everyone was in complete shock. We got the ranger. Boyfriend got into a helicopter to show where the remains were. Turns out to be a presumed suicide of a young male who had been missing for almost a year. It was suspicious the whole skeleton was still intact though, and the images burned into my brain. I was leading an expedition over the Devil's Elbow for our main base camp into Panther Town Valley. We had decided to spend a day on a nearby detour to some waterfalls. We'd seen 2 so far, and were deep into a bushwhack looking for a third. We were struggling through a thicket of briars and brambles when suddenly everything clears. No trees, no bushes, no briars, only an overgrown grassy clearing. Dead in the middle was a rusted old ferris wheel. It wasn't huge, probably only 30 feet high, and obviously built for smaller children. It was rusted and some faded, with tall grass growing around its base. We stood there in silence, unsure of exactly how to process it. There was no reason for that to be there. Somebody at some point had hauled this thing out piece by piece and assembled it there. The question is, why? My old roommate and a friend went hiking in the woods in Tennessee. We were minding our own business when we came upon a stream. On the other side of the stream, getting ready to cross, was a group of about 5 to 6 dudes, only wearing socks and shoes. Naked bros hiking in the woods. I'm all about being in your birthday suit or whatever, but it was weird seeing it for the first time. And apparently it's a thing. I really hope they use an excess of bug spray. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's collection of stories. If of course you did, be sure to let me know in the usual way down below. I really do appreciate it immensely. Your comments really go a long way. Noticed I'm not really getting that many anymore. I appreciate that I'm not replying to as many as before, but I am quite tired all the time. Having 3 kids is definitely a lot more challenging than having just 1 or 2. So I hope you understand, but I do try and reply to them every once in a while. And I do enjoy reading them. I do often read through them. I'll probably start hearting them as well again. Sorry about that, guys. I'd like to extend a huge thank you as always to my members and my patrons for your continued support. It goes a hell of a long way and it really means a lot, so thank you guys. If you'd like to be a member or a patron to receive exclusive benefits, you can follow the links in the description to find out more. But I think we'll leave it here for now. Thank you for joining me in the woods. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.